Hello, pepperonis. I don't know why. Every time I have like a spare moment to do a video, or I like think like, oh, I should do a video, I'm like always cleaning. So I'm like currently cleaning again. I feel like you guys get me like only when I'm cleaning. So sorry about the noise in the background. I have the washer on, I have the dryer on, I got everything on. So I did get my hair cut and colored. However, that was like 4 or 5 days ago and I haven't washed it since. So I'll show it to you guys, but it's like unstyled, so it kind of looks crazy. So yeah, so it's like a super short bob. And when I style it, it's really cute. But I haven't like really had an opportunity to post any like cute pictures or anything, but I will soon. So what I wanted to talk about with you guys was depression, because I had somebody who reached out to me. Also, I'm like having a snack. A little bit. I'm doing this. I had somebody reach out to me and say, by the way, I've been loving ginger ale lately. I've been drinking so much ginger ale. As you can tell by there's like 2 packages there, and there's another one in the fridge. I had someone reach out to me on Snapchat and say that I think they're like getting on depression medication or something, and they were asking me about depression medication and about, I think they were just like curious in general. And I've had some people ask me before, so I don't think I've ever really talked about it. So I said that I would do a video for them. I think it was like a week ago that I said I would do that. But I've just been really busy, super busy. I actually didn't even go to school today because I felt kind of sick, my head hurt. So yeah, I decided to do this video. Okay, depression. So I kind of always knew oh my god, hi, you wanna say hi? You know who's not depressed? Mochi Alexander Kelly. He's such a good boy. Say hi. Say hi. If you're depressed, get a dog. Seriously. Just make sure you're able to take care of it. So, I kind of always knew I was depressed. So, I'm gonna turn off the dryer. So, I remember always being depressed, and that's not an overstatement. I really remember always being depressed. I remember being a very young child and being extremely sad about things that really didn't make sense. And I overanalyzed everything. I remember it was my 6th birthday and I had this crown and there were these stickers. It was the sticker book. And in the sticker book, it had like what age you were, and you put that onto the crown. And I remember sitting, and there was this gigantic party. My parents had clowns and they had horses and they had like ponies or something, but it was this big party, and I remember the whole house was alive and it was so fun. And I was just sitting there looking at this crown and looking at this sticker book and thinking, because it like ended at 10, and I remember thinking like, when I become 11, does that mean I'm not a child anymore? Does that mean I'm not a princess anymore? Does that mean like what happens then? Like I just remember like overanalyzing things, and instead of being happy that it was this big birthday party for me, and instead of being happy, I was terribly sad. And then I remember it was snowing and it was so beautiful, and I remember my siblings and I were making this huge snow fort, and I was so happy, and it was like just such like a happy moment. And I remember the snow was falling, and I just like was looking up at the snow, and my face was cold, and I remember the snow falling on me, and I just thought, wow, in 80 years I'm probably gonna be dead. Like that was a real thought. Yeah, I wasn't thinking about how fun it was. I was thinking about the fact that I was gonna be dead someday, and that my parents were gonna be dead, and everyone was gonna be dead, and then nobody would remember me. And I was like a little kid, like I must have been probably under 8. I remember going to Disney World with my family, and I was probably about 12. And I remember we were all going on this ride, and I just thought, wow, it's really sad because this is probably the last time the whole family will go to Disney together. Like, it wasn't, I could never just be in the moment and like have fun. So that happened. I also had kind of a traumatic childhood. So, I don't want to say anything bad about my parents, because honestly, I think my parents really tried. My dad is 100% Irish, and he grew up in a very big family, and his father was an alcoholic who was very abusive, and my grandmother, you know, very typical Irish woman. She was very cold, and my dad was one of many children, and they, in my opinion, my dad, just families in general, I think then, like, really didn't say I love you very much. They really weren't very huggative and stuff, which is weird. Huggative is not a word. Huggative. But my dad is actually my dad does say I love you, and my dad does hug me, and I think that my dad does have some tendencies where he's selfish. He won't ask about like, oh, how was your day or how is this going, but he'll definitely tell me about some song he's writing, or he'll definitely tell me about something that's going on in his life. But that is just something that my dad has always been like. And when I was a child, I remember just kind of always feeling like, I actually really get along with my dad now. Like, I'm really daddy's girl now. But when I was a child, I remember always feeling not as loved as my siblings, because I was a girl. I always remember thinking that I wasn't as good as my siblings, and if I was a boy, my dad would love me more, because I always wanted to play the guitar, and I would beg my dad to teach me, and I would beg my dad to have me take guitar lessons, and he wouldn't, but my brothers would. And I always felt like I was trying to get my father's attention and trying to get his approval, but I couldn't because I wasn't a boy. I remember one time I thought we were all going to the movies, and I got ready, and then when I went to go out, my dad had already left with my brothers, and that wasn't an unusual thing where I was kind of just forgotten about. And I think that definitely like plays into my depression, because I always felt as though I really wasn't good enough. And I always felt as though, yeah, I just felt like I wasn't good enough. As far as it was my mom's father abandoned her family when my mother was very young. My mom was about 3. So my mom never had a father. And my mom also grew up unbelievably poor. Like, my mother did not have time to dream. My mom did not have toys. She did not have dresses. She did not have anything. For her to have food, for her not to go to bed hungry and cry herself to sleep, that was all my mother cared about. And so my mom never really had a childhood, because she always had to work. She always had to be doing things. She wasn't really allowed to have fun because she really couldn't. And that definitely plays into my mother now, because my mom is still like that. So when I was a child, my mom really never played with me. I remember I always wanted to play Barbies, or I always wanted to play with her, and she was always busy. She was always working, which she had to do, you know, to support our family. And my mom was always working. She was always on the phone, and she never really had time for me. And my brothers never played with me. And also my mom was really, I would say strict, but she was really scared of something happening to us, like us being kidnapped. So I really wasn't allowed to play with anyone. Like, I didn't have any friends. Like, I really didn't have any friends. I wasn't really allowed to go to anyone's house. I had one friend when I was in the 3rd grade. When I was like in the 5th grade, I was allowed to have some like more friends, but I was never allowed to sleep over at anyone's house. I wasn't allowed to do things. It's just like, you know how normally you can say to your kid like, oh, you know, go play with so-and-so. I wasn't allowed to do that. And things that other people do, you know, like family cookouts, like we didn't really do that. And like 4th of July parties, we didn't really do that. So I really wasn't socialized as a child, which I think also had a big thing to do with my depression / anxiety, because when I got into school, it was like really crazy for me because I was not used to not being with my mother. I was not used to being around other people. I didn't really know how to talk to other kids. I didn't know, so I was really shy because I really had never been around other kids. The only people I'd ever been around were my siblings, and they never really talked to me or played with me. They were always really mean to me. So I had a very weird, like I remember the first day of school, I was hysterically crying, and there was this other girl, Heidi, and she was crying too, and no one else was crying. Everyone else was fine because, you know, they had been around cousins and family and, you know, probably camp and all this stuff by that age, and I hadn't ever been away from my mother. So I remember, I believe it was kindergarten or first grade. No, kindergarten. I remember kindergarten being extremely traumatizing for me. And when my mom would drop me off at school, I just remember having so much anxiety because I didn't have anybody to talk to, and I didn't know how to talk to other kids. I didn't know how to play with other kids. So that really had a big thing to do with my anxiety, is that I wasn't socialized. I was like a puppy who had never been around other puppies or had never been around other dogs. So I was very, very weird. Also, I'm dyslexic. So when I got diagnosed with being dyslexic, before I got diagnosed with being dyslexic, when people knew something was wrong, I remember being in school and you start to learn how to read, and everybody else was getting it and I wasn't getting it. I wasn't getting syllables, I wasn't getting vowels, and also I would just say I was a lot slower than the other kids. And I don't know if that has something to do with my mom being so strict or what, but like I didn't know my own birthday. Like our teacher asked us all what our birthday was, so she put it on the calendar, and I didn't know my birthday. I didn't know simple things that kids my age knew. I don't know. It was just, yeah. So my camera's gonna die. So I'm not trying to put blame on my mother or my father, but another thing about my childhood was that I was extremely abused, and the abuse definitely plays a big part in my everyday life now. So I have post-traumatic stress. So post-traumatic stress pretty much means that something like life-threatening happened, or your brain and your body perceived it as life-threatening, and you did not know how to properly get through the situation. So in a sense, your brain kind of detaches itself. Think of memories as being on a conveyor belt, and there's tiny memories. You went for a walk, you saw a friend, you did this, you did that, little memories. They go through the conveyor belt, and this is a big box that processes the things. When something huge happens, like let's say you almost die, or you're raped, or physical, mental abuse happens, especially when you're a really young child and you don't understand things, it makes a very big box, and it's stuck. It gets stuck in the conveyor belt, and it won't go through. Think of that as post-traumatic stress. So I wasn't able to process things, and that had a lot to do with why I drank really heavily for a really long time. I remember the first time I got really drunk, I was probably 21, and I remember getting really drunk, and I remember thinking, oh my God, this is wonderful. I don't feel anything, or I'm not thinking about stuff, because I would have really bad flashbacks. I would wake up with flashbacks. I would go to sleep with flashbacks. I would talk to people and I would have flashbacks. I would have flashbacks all the time. I wouldn't wish post-traumatic stress on anyone because it's debilitating. It makes you not want to talk to people. It makes you not want to get out of bed in the morning because it's like you're in a bad dream that you can't get out of. it's not just like you're in a flashback. It's like your whole body is in a flashback. So you feel how you felt at that moment. You breathe how you breathed at that moment. Everything stops and you can't get out. So it took me a really, really long time to, I guess, admit to myself what had happened, and I guess to admit to others what had happened, and I guess to really figure out how to help myself. So I started going on Celexa. It was actually a day after my 30th birthday. And I have never been better. I really haven't. If it wasn't for Celexa, I would not have been able to go to esthetician school. I probably would not be as well-rounded as I am now. I definitely would probably still be drinking a lot because I didn't know how to like cope with things, because it was either I was sleeping or I was drinking or I was having flashbacks. And I was really, really detached. That's something that I still am. It's still hard for me to make connections with people. I still have a lot of problems, and I know that. But the Celexa helps a lot because it blocks the flashbacks. So I used to wake up with flashbacks. And when I say flashbacks, I mean you wake up and you're in it. You're like in this horrible situation. So that would start the rest of my day off like that. That doesn't happen anymore. I still have flashbacks, but they're not as intense. It doesn't feel like I'm in the situation, and I'm getting through it. You know, it's a day-by-day process, and yeah, some days I still do sleep all day, and some days, you know, I wonder like, why the fuck did all this horrible shit happen to me? But that's life. Bad stuff happens to good people all the time. But you can't stop living because of bad things happening, and you have to make peace with yourself, and you have to make peace with things that have happened to you, because if you don't, you'll go crazy. And yeah, I'm still fucking pissed off, and my childhood really fucking scarred me. Sorry, my camera keeps dying, so I'm just gonna like finish this up. I'm just gonna give like an example of like some abuse that I went through as a child. So I was like constantly being beat up, like constantly. I remember that I was a punching bag. And I remember this one time, my friend Caitlin was in the car. We had to drive her home from school because her mom was actually going through chemotherapy. And Caitlin was in the backseat, and I don't remember where I was. I was in the car, probably in the backseat with her. And my brother had gotten in the car, and I remember he just turned around and started beating up Caitlin for no reason. He just got in the car, started beating her up. And it was this huge thing. I remember my mom was screaming, and I remember Caitlin was crying, and I remember my brother kept apologizing, and then it was this big thing where we had to bring her home, and my brother had to apologize to her and her parents. And it was so serious. I remember it being such a serious situation. And I just thought, oh wow, I must be a real piece of shit, because this happens to me almost every day and no one's ever cared. Like, my parents never acted like it was a big deal when I was beaten up. My brother never apologized. It was just kind of like, if that was me and he turned around and beat me up, my mom probably wouldn't have said a word, and it would have been that. So I was constantly treated just unbelievably disrespectfully. Like, they would call me, my brothers would call me a cunt and a twat and a bitch and just horrible names, and I was really, really young. And I was just abused horribly my whole childhood. And it was one of those things that my mom would tell me, if you tell anyone, then they'll take you away from me, and you'll go to a foster home, and this will happen and that will happen. So it kind of became a secret where I didn't talk about things. And other stuff happened, and I'll probably get into that another time, but when I would tell my mom would always kind of say, don't ever tell anyone. And that really stuck with me throughout my life. And now that I'm in my 30s, if I say to my mom, because now I don't give a fuck. I will literally say to my mom, well, you said this to me, and my mom denies everything, always denies everything. And she will say, oh, you never told me that, or oh, you're lying. She's a really big victim blamer. Whereas my dad, if I tell him something, my dad would be like, okay, if you say that happened, then that happened. Whereas my mom is like, that never happened, you're a liar. And I think that's because it's easier for my mom to just think I'm a liar and deny things that happened. And you know, things that she wasn't there for, she'll act like I'm crazy and that there's no way that could have happened when I 100% know that happened, which is just her prerogative. So yeah, that is my video. I hope that maybe that helped some of you guys. If you're struggling, don't think you're alone. See a psychiatrist. Get on medication. Medication might not be right for everybody, but medication was right for me and it helped me a lot. And also talk therapy. Talk to somebody. I don't need you, and you should know.